Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, as I record this episode today, an email has popped in my inbox from PayPal saying, "Hey Neil, you can buy crypto from PayPal now." And meanwhile, if I flick on the news, that's telling me that here in the UK, there are also plans to explore their own central bank digital currency, CBDC, or Britcoin as it's been dubbed. Now, these two instances are further evidence to me that we're seeing an increasing adoption of cryptocurrency. And we're beginning to explore new ways that could truly revolutionise the way we move money around the world. However, Joe Baguley, VP and CTO EMEA at VMware, he warns that of the conflict around sustainability and the government's green ambitions right now, and the high environment burden of cryptocurrencies. But he also has lots to be excited about in that space too, so I've invited him on the podcast today. So wherever you are listening to me in the world, I'm going to ask you to buckle up and hold on tight, because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to the UK so you can join me and Joe in conversation about all this, VMworld, the future of work, and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Joe. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Europe, Middle East and Africa at VMware, which is possibly there's Vice President in front of that as well. So it's an incredibly long title. But in essence, I work as part of the Office of the CTO here at VMware. And our job is really looking at sort of the next 3 to 5 year roadmap for our customers and for technology. And when we provide sort of that guidance and strategy back to the company and form part of what we're doing next. So my day job, I tend to divide into 3 areas. It's quite cool. They're all CTO. The first one is Chief Technology Officer, which is what you'd expect, which is working with our product teams on strategy and technology. The second is Chief Talking Officer, which is kind of this and other things as well with our customers. And the third is Chief Therapy Officer, where I spend a lot of time with our customers, leadership, CIOs, etc., guiding them through what's going on and what isn't going on, I suppose, and then generally telling people, no, you're not as bad. Everyone else is as bad as you are at what you're trying to do. So it's okay. So yeah, it's an interesting and varied job.
It feels like you're spinning a lot of plates there. You've had a great career in technology. But before we learn more about what you're doing at VMware, a question I always like to ask my guests at the beginning of the show is ask them to share their origin story and where your passion for technology came from, and ultimately what put you on the path that you're on today. Can you remember what lit that spark for you?
Oh, that's like a 45-minute podcast in itself. Yeah, it's a brief one. The first thing to understand is that I grew up surrounded by technology. My father worked for IBM. He started off his career at the National Physical Laboratory, but very quickly switched to IBM because they paid him more money in the late 60s. And that was back in the days where he had a proper tool case. He went around with spanners and stuff in it for fixing computers. And so I grew up with sort of, that surrounding me. And I'd always had a passion for technology. And so I went on to, let's just say I didn't sit there at age 14 and go, I want to be a CTO, because in the mid 80s, CTOs didn't exist, right? It wasn't a thing. So it was just, I want to play with tech. I'm really passionate about it. I have to have the latest gadget. And I've just sort of fallen into a career. There's a whole story about, various consulting jobs and bits and pieces and writing bits of code that are still running today and things and stuff like that. But yeah, it's basically a passion for technology. I'm sat here today excitedly waiting for my new iPhone to arrive, so it literally, if my family joke and my friends joke, if it's got flashing lights on it and takes batteries or electricity, then Joe's probably got it. It also explains I have a passion for electric cars, and I explain that they're the biggest gadgets I can get. So yeah, it's in my blood.
Love that. And for everyone listening, we're recording this podcast today on the launch day of the iPhone. And which model did you go for in the end?
13 Pro. Yeah. The camera for me, definitely. The camera, I've got the 12 Pro, which will now get passed down to my daughter. But yeah, the camera is just stunning. I've stopped using SLRs. In fact, my SLR is sat here and used for Zoom now.
Love that. And of course, that path led you to VMware. And as someone that is beginning to miss tech conferences, it's great to see that VMworld is back this year with a fantastic lineup too. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about what they can expect this year and some of those big name guests that you've managed to get there?
Yeah, so we're still virtual, unfortunately. I did a first live event in London yesterday, but we want to be, well, I'm hoping we'll be back in person next year. It's been huge for me. I've been doing these for 10 years and it's the highlight of my year. And this year it's going to be virtual. It's free to register. It's from the 5th to the 7th of October. We've got the usual jam-packed agenda. I think going virtual means we can do more. So we've got over 1,100 sessions and we've got some fantastic presentations from people, including me, obviously. But in terms of special guests, we've got some really cool ones. We've got Michael J. Fox, who's going to be speaking about his passion to help find a cure to Parkinson's. And also another really cool one, Will Smith, who's going to be discussing how to thrive through sort of continual transformation and growth. And there's a few more besides. You've got the other CEOs, as we call them. So Satya Nadella from Microsoft, obviously, and Thomas Kurian from Google Cloud. And a personal one for me, because I spend a lot of time with her, and this is going to make sense in a second, is Robin Arzon. She's the VP of fitness programming at Peloton. And I'm a big Peloton fan. So, yeah, it's quite cool to have someone from Peloton on there as well.
Oh, man, that's incredibly cool. And the community behind Peloton is something else, isn't it? I think once you're in that community, people become obsessed with it. I'm sure you've got a lot of clothing there as well, haven't you?
It's weird. People don't understand, but I met two of the instructors in London walking, through a park, and the people I was with are like, who are these two random people? I was like, oh my God, it's like meeting superstars because you spend so much time with them. And, it was very interesting. It was meeting Ben and Leanne. And so, yeah, it's kind of cool. But yeah, I'm a man gone from a man who hates gyms and would never even contemplate, doing an online exercise class. I've been utterly surprised over the last year by how engaging it's been. Yeah, it's great fun.
Love it. And back down to earth here in the UK, there have been a few news stories about the UK exploring its own central bank digital currency, CBDC, or Britcoin, as all the news headlines deemed it. But Rishi Sunak even said that Britcoin could tackle some of the challenges posed by popular cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. And by that, I mean things like regulatory and the volatility side of things. But then I read that you believe that they should consider the sustainability cost of introducing Britcoin en masse and how it could actually foil the government's green ambitions due to the unjustifiably high environmental burden of cryptocurrencies. It's a story that I think everybody's got an opinion on, but can you expand on that news story and the concerns around the announcement from your point of view?
Yeah, I think if you think about it, cryptocurrencies generally is a very cool thing. Cryptocurrencies, everyone talks about them. So everyone's got a friend who's made some money on cryptocurrency, right? And it's surged massively in the last decade. And you've got people like Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey and Branson and others all endorsing various different bits of it in various fun or unfun ways, I suppose. The problem you've got is that some of the core ones that are the biggest ones, which is like, and it's too late to put them back in the box now, like Bitcoin, rely on proof of work. And proof of work means that someone essentially has to do an awful lot of computational work using, you'll see them, these huge Bitcoin miners and, massive great big data centers to do that. And they consume an incredible amount of energy. So, if we're going to adopt a cryptocurrency, which has some fantastic benefits. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against cryptocurrencies. What we're really saying is that if you are going to move towards cryptocurrency, make sure that we're using one that's not proof of work. Don't pick something like Bitcoin, for example. And with the UK clearly having green ambitions, you're hearing, COP20 and other, the COP26 and all the other different things that are coming up at the moment, right? They've clearly got these green ambitions, but they need to make sure that when they do develop this Britcoin, it doesn't negatively impact any progress to achieve these. The problem with, for example, Bitcoin is I don't think the founders and designers of Bitcoin properly thought it through when they did it and realized quite how much energy it would be taking. And so, I want to make sure with my voice towards the government and others that we don't make that same mistake if we do launch a Britcoin, for example. So we need to think of a cryptocurrency that's almost green by design. It could be awesome if it was a green currency. It could be greener than real currency if thought through carefully, but it's critical that any country exploring those bear that in mind.
And I'm curious, just to put the energy consumption thing into perspective, do you have any stats to hand that will just help people listening understand the fundamental mistake that the founders of Britcoin could make by building a cryptocurrency on a proof-of-work blockchain that consumes that kind of energy?
Yeah, we need to be careful because this is a point of contention, I think, between Bitcoin fans and others as to how these things are calculated. But put very simply, if Bitcoin was a currency, it was a country, instead of a currency, it would be in the top 30 energy users worldwide. Bitcoin currently uses more energy than Argentina does, which is just that's mind numbing when you think about it, right? Just for running a digital currency, we're using more energy than Argentina does. And the real rub on that is it's unnecessarily using that energy. And that's the real problem.
And can you also expand on why we cannot simply just unpick the environmental problems proof of work blockchains have caused by plugging renewable resources into powering them? Because it's not that simple, is it?
Well, no, and I think if you just say, okay, well, let's just switch. If we're powering that with renewable energy, then what's your problem, Joe? If it's 100% renewable, it's all done with solar. Then why do you care? Yeah. I'm kind of much more on the take of, well, hang on a second. We've got so much other stuff that's possibly more important to do than running a cryptocurrency that we could use that renewable energy for. If you're putting that much solar in, we could be using that for heating homes. We could be using that for vehicles. We could be using that for industry. We could be using that for making steel. We're sitting in the middle of an energy crisis in the UK right now due to a lack of gas. If we'd invested more in renewables then, we wouldn't have so much of a problem now. But if someone's using all that renewable we've created to unnecessarily do calculations for a cryptocurrency, because you can do cryptocurrencies without using so much energy, that's the problem. So we're too far down the line with these things, but it's a delicate balance, right? You think to yourself, well, okay, let's do them with renewables, but even if we are using renewables for them, that's still not as good as we could be, which would not be using anything at all. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And for want of a better phrase, like you said, we are further down the road, and there's no going back. And that horrible business phrase of it is what it is, we are where we are. But for the UK to seriously consider its own CBDC, how do you think it can learn from the industry's early mistakes and then ultimately ensure that it is green by design? Is there any advice that you can offer around that?
Oh, totally. And it's not an advert for VMware either. The advice is the industry's moved on since the proof of work stuff that came out with Bitcoin many years ago. We've now got an alternative one, which is called proof of stake, which do not require energy mining like the other ones do. So you don't have all these mining rigs and all this energy use, et cetera, et cetera. So they're therefore much more energy efficient. They still work on the same principles. They're still as secure. They still work on the blockchain, so to speak. But unlike proof of work, the validators don't need to use significant amounts of computational power because they're just selected at random. They're not competing. So they don't need to mine blocks. They just need to create blocks when they're chosen and validate those when they're not. So things like Ethereum, you're looking at Ethereum when there's great news coming from them because Ethereum 2, when it comes to operational, will be, proof of stake. So these are all steps in the right direction to enabling crypto innovation in a much more sustainable way. So the answer is crypto is not bad by design. Some crypto is bad. So we need to make sure, that if we are going into this route, that we pick something that is sustainable and is not unnecessarily wasting energy. And mining is just unnecessarily wasting energy.
And it's important for me to point out, you are a tech guy. You love all things technology, and we're not putting the doom and gloom on cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin, etc. No. So I've got to ask, what excites you about the future, and in particular the role that blockchain and crypto could play in that future too?
Well, I think it's great because what you're looking at is, I suppose, it's in, people call it a democratization of currency or whatever it is. In a way, it's a way of having possible currencies that span countries. I think is a really good way to look at it. It's a way of having currencies that are split away from some of the traditional models. They enable us to do new and interesting things in what we can do in handling money, so to speak, and where investments sit and how they run. I think it also enables people to cut some of the middlemen out of the way, which is why people like some of these cryptocurrencies in the first place, because it sort of cuts some people out of the loop. At the same time, if you've got a governmental one, it's fantastic because it'll actually save governments money in terms of tracking transactions and tax and all these other kind of things as well. So it should make things easier in some ways too. But again, people need to think about how to design them for scale. So it's exciting. It's really exciting. But what we have to be careful with, as I sort of saying here, is we can make decisions now that in 10 years' time we could regret. So it really does need to be thought through very carefully about the long-term impact in terms of scale. One of the things I always challenge our internal developers to do is when they're developing a piece of software or whatever, is, okay, well, we write billions on a board. And they're like, what do you mean? Well, what if billions of people were using this product? What if we were running this on billions of computers? What if it was running on billions of nodes with billions amounts of whatever? Whatever you do, multiply it by a billion. Would it still work? Would it still make sense? And if you look at a lot of the technical debt that we're in now, it's because people didn't have those scale conversations early on. So, with all these things, a lot of what we've been caught by in the cloud and the explosion of technology is people not expecting the scale that we've hit in certain technologies. So almost like if we go into this, it's exciting for me because we could achieve some fantastic scale, but let's be prepared.
And as I have you on the podcast today, I think a topic that we've got to look at before I let you go is the fact that over the last 18 months, everyone has been on an incredible journey. And by that, it began with working from home at scale. Now we're exploring hybrid working. And now we're building this new future of work where we can work from anywhere, any device, at any time and any location. So how are you evolving at VMware, and what role do you see VMware playing in this new future that we're building?
It's been great, actually. I mean, so as a company that provides the technology to enable people to work from home in a distributed way, and I've been out telling this story for 10 plus years about zero trust and work from anywhere, etc. It's been interesting to have this huge proof of concept in sad and unfortunate circumstances, but it's been interesting to see it happen, and a lot of people realizing the possible. So for us, actually, as a company, how we're working, we've made the decision, and we're allowing all of our employees globally to choose where they work. They can choose to work fully at home, they can choose to work fully in an office, they can choose to work in a hybrid fashion. We've already started opening some of our offices back up around the globe, and people that want to go and use those can use those, and people that don't have to. And I think that's opened us up to a new talent pool, a workforce that feels a lot more free, I think, and able to where they live and how they operate and how they build their life. So that's quite revolutionary for us. It's transformative. So I think it is really good. It's interesting because it's different to challenging a lot of people with old ways of thinking about things and how to manage people and how to manage projects, etc. But we've been working distributed environments at VMware for a long time, running distributed development teams around the world. So it's not been a huge step for us. It was kind of like, so we're just working more from home rather than never done that before. I think for a lot of people, what we're doing for our customers is enabling them to take that journey rapidly at the start. We were doing an awful lot of things like enabling people to build the Nightingale hospitals or those wonderful things at the start. But it's much more, now it's how do you do that in a long-term, sustainable, secure way? So how do I enable people to very quickly work from home? But more importantly, how do I make sure they're doing that securely and in a way that is, productive for them? And that's really where we step in with our sort of Workspace ONE solutions and all the other products that we do. So yeah, it's worth having a conversation with someone at VMware about how we can transform that for you, because people don't realize quite the extent of devices. We're managing application and data access on, from what people obviously think, which is on people's phones and on people's, laptops, down to we're managing, wind turbines. We're looking at how people can put the new generation of technology into police cars and so on and so forth. So we're starting to see people really think more about a less centralized world and a more distributed world.
Love that. And we began our conversation today talking about your origin story and how you got involved in tech. But before I let you go, as we come full circle, a question I always like to ask my guests is what song inspired them in their past, helped them in their career, or helps them get their head in the zone before going on stage, or just reminds them of their career in tech. And as someone that must have headphones on while on your Peloton or flying to a tech conference with some noise cancelling earphones, I'm sure you've got a few playlists there. So is there a song and story you can share?
My musical taste is wonderfully eclectic. I've, as a 70s and 80s child, I've got, a deep heritage in things like Mike Oldfield, Jean-Michel Jarre, Alan Parsons, Clannad, Kraftwerk. I'm off to see Genesis in a couple of weeks, which I'm quite excited about. But there's a sort of rock vibe in what I'm doing as well, based on my father raising me on Clapton. And so Led Zeppelin and Floyd are in there as well. So, answering this question is hard. I sort of jump to things like Left Field or Faithless with God is a DJ. My favorite ones is Elbow, Grounds for Divorce. If you ever listen to that, about 1 minute 14, there's that sting in it, which has been used a few times by me on, walking on stage on tech conferences, thinking I'm some kind of rock star, which is embarrassing. But if you want my go-to song, I suppose it would have to be Romeo and Juliet by Dire Straits. It's just, there's some emotion in there. There's some calmness in there. It literally goes on a roller coaster, and to be taken on that roller coaster, when I'm trying to think about what to do next or whatever. And it's a connection because it's a song that my father and my mother both love a lot. And actually now my daughter is deeply into that song too. So it's a nice generational connection too. So it keeps me connected. So yeah, definitely that song's awesome.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. A great song and also an amazing story behind it. And I'll let you into a little secret. Your Genesis gig is going to be amazing. I saw them 2 nights ago here in Birmingham. I know you might have a few concerns with Phil Collins being a little frail, but he's absolutely fantastic.
I saw him live at the Albert Hall a couple of years ago, and with his son, with Nick on drums, and it was amazing. So I'm so looking forward to seeing the whole band back together, literally.
Yeah, and Nick is something else on the drums, isn't he?
He's amazing. I'm so impressed.
Well, there's another podcast for us both there. But before I let you go, for anyone listening wanting to find out more information about anything we've talked about about VMware today, the conference coming up as well, or just contact your team, what's the best starting point for all that?
I think the best place to look is if you just jump on Google, I suppose. Have a Google of VMworld 2021. Jump on there, register, listen, and come along. And I think that'll be a really good way to learn more about all the things I've talked about today. And specifically, you'll hear a lot more about our 2030 agenda and our 3030 goals around, environmental, social, and governance and stuff, which is close to my heart too. So as we start to change what we do with our products, and we start to change what we do for our customers as well. So one of the great things about working at VMware is we're all actually interested in a better future for all of us, and hopefully that message will come across. So yeah, come along, listen to VMworld, and learn a bit more about a company that maybe does things differently to the way you think they do.
Well, we've covered so much in a short amount of time today, from the sustainability cost of introducing Britcoin en-masse to hybrid working to VMworld, etc. But more than anything, it was hearing about your story. Really brought everything to life. So a big thank you for taking the time to come and share that with me today.
Cheers, Neil. It's been really good fun. Thank you.
Wow, we really covered quite a lot there, didn't we? And it certainly got me thinking about why we cannot simply unpick the environmental problems caused by crypto by simply plugging renewable resources into powering them. But we can explore how we can build a more sustainable blockchain ecosystem. And how cool does that VMworld conference sound? But enough from me. If you have any questions, opinions, experiences, insights, or just would like to come on this podcast and share your story, whatever it is, remember, I'm the easiest guy in the world to find. LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, simply at Neil C. Hughes. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk, where you'll find nearly 2,000 interviews that we've had now between this and the other podcast I host with Citrix called Tech Fusion. But we've reached the end of another episode, so I'll be back bright and early tomorrow, lurking deep inside your podcast feed, waiting for you to open it up. So thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.